The scream of brakes shattered the quiet street, and in the blink of an eye, Emma's small body hit the pavement. Lily's cry tore through the air as panic gripped the neighborhood. But before James could even reach his daughter, Clara, the quiet babysitter who had slipped so seamlessly into their lives, was already there. Cradling the child in her arms, her voice steady, commanding, "Start the truck." Now, they sped to the hospital, but what happened next stunned James more than the accident itself. As cameras flashed and reporters swarmed, one name cut through the chaos: Clara Harrington. In that moment, James realized the woman who had been reading bedtime stories to his twin daughters was no ordinary babysitter. She was the daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, and she had been hiding in his home all along. The hum of an old ceiling fan filled the kitchen as James Miller set 2 bowls of oatmeal on the table, his hands rough from years of woodworking. Morning sunlight leaked through the blinds in thin stripes, landing across the crayons and unfinished homework that always seemed to scatter no matter how many times he tidied up. "Emma, Lily, breakfast," he called, his voice carrying both weariness and warmth. Within seconds, the sound of hurried feet echoed down the hallway, followed by twin laughter that never failed to lift the heaviness pressing against his chest. At 39, James wore his exhaustion in the lines around his eyes and the stiffness in his shoulders. He had not planned on raising 2 daughters alone, but life rarely respected plans. His wife, Sarah, had been gone for 3 years now, an illness that stole her quickly, leaving him with debts and 2 little girls who still asked, on rainy nights, if their mother might come back. Emma was the more serious of the twins, with her mother's steady gaze, while Lily brimmed with energy, always finding a way to turn even chores into games. They were only 8, still young enough to need tucking in, but old enough to sense when their father's sigh lingered too long. His wife, Sarah, had been gone for 3 years now, an illness that stole her quickly, leaving him with debts and 2 little girls who still asked, on rainy nights, if their mother might come back. Emma was the more serious of the twins, with her mother's steady gaze, while Lily brimmed with energy, always finding a way to turn even chores into games. They were only 8, still young enough to need tucking in, but old enough to sense when their father's sigh lingered too long. The small house on the edge of town was crumbling in places, the porch railing loose. The paint faded, but to James it was sanctuary. Still, bills piled higher each month, and the tutoring shifts he took after his regular teaching job meant he was gone more often than he wanted. The thought of leaving Emma and Lily alone weighed heavily, gnawing at him every time he closed the door behind him. He needed help, but asking for it felt like admitting defeat. After weeks of resisting, James placed an ad at the local community board. Babysitter wanted afternoons and evenings. Patience with twins required. He almost tore it down the next day, ashamed to need someone else to fill the gaps he could not. But when Clara showed up, everything shifted. She had introduced herself quietly, a young woman in her 20s with chestnut hair pulled into a simple braid and eyes that seemed too old for her age. Her clothes were plain jeans, a pale sweater, and there was something about the way she smiled at the girls that dissolved James's hesitation. Emma, usually cautious, tugged Clara's hand within minutes. Lily, ever curious, bombarded her with questions. "Do you know how to make pancakes? Can you braid hair like Mom did? Will you tell us stories before bed?" Clara answered each one with a gentle laugh, not promising perfection, but offering something more important attention. James noticed her handwriting when she filled out the simple form he'd prepared. Neat, elegant, the kind of script that looked practiced in quiet hours. He thought little of it at the time, though a flicker of curiosity crossed his mind. Babysitters were usually distracted, tapping at phones, but Clara carried no phone in sight. Instead, she carried a small leather notebook, tucked close, as though it mattered more than anything she owned. That evening, James returned home from his tutoring job to find the girls curled on the couch beside Clara, who was reading aloud from a book of fairy tales. Her voice was calm, melodic, and for the first time in months, Emma wasn't fidgeting with her sleeve. Lily wasn't bouncing with restless energy. They were listening, their breathing even, as if anchored by something steady. Watching them, James felt an ache, a reminder of Sarah's voice in the same room, telling bedtime stories long ago. Later, as he walked Clara to the door, he thanked her with a sincerity he didn't expect. "They like you," he said, his throat tight. Clara smiled but looked away, almost as if the words were too heavy to carry. "They're easy to like," she murmured. Then she left, her notebook pressed tightly against her chest. In the days that followed, Clara blended into their lives as though she had always been meant to. She knew how to calm Emma when storms rattled the windows, how to turn Lily's boundless energy into makeshift dance recitals in the living room. Yet, beneath her gentleness, James noticed moments brief, fleeting, when her expression turned guarded. Once, he walked in earlier than expected and saw her scribbling furiously in that notebook, her shoulders tense. When she realized he was there, she snapped it shut with such speed it startled him. He wanted to ask, but something in her eyes told him not to. He pushed the thought aside, convincing himself secrets didn't matter as long as his daughters were happy. For the first time in years, James felt like his family had a rhythm again. But as he watched Clara tuck Emma and Lily into bed one night, her braid falling loose as she kissed their foreheads like a sister or a mother might, he couldn't shake a single question that echoed louder each day. Who exactly had he let into their lives, and why did it feel as though she was hiding a story of her own? Autumn settled into the small town with crisp air and fading leaves, and Clara's presence in the Miller household grew so natural that James often caught himself wondering how he ever managed without her. She became more than a babysitter. She was a steady companion for Emma and Lily, someone who seemed to understand the small aches they carried. On evenings when thunder cracked across the sky, Emma would curl against Clara's side, soothed by the soft melodies Clara hummed, songs James didn't recognize but found hauntingly beautiful. Lily, restless as ever, begged Clara to teach her how to dance, and soon the living room floor became a makeshift stage where the twins spun and laughed under Clara's gentle guidance. Yet it wasn't only the girls who noticed something different about Clara. James did too. She cooked with a kind of precision that spoke of training, and when she told stories, her vocabulary carried the refinement of someone educated, far beyond what her modest clothes suggested. Once, when the television sputtered with static during a storm, Clara deftly adjusted the wires and fixed the signal, her hands moving with surprising confidence. James raised an eyebrow. "You've done that before," he remarked. Clara only smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what you learn if you're paying attention." Her answers were always like that, warm, but evasive, leaving James both impressed and curious. The girls, however, were too enamored to question. They followed her from room to room, begging for stories or songs, clinging to her as though she had always been part of their family. One Saturday afternoon, Emma and Lily rummaged through the coat rack looking for mittens before a walk to the park. That was when Lily spotted the chain glinting beneath Clara's sweater. With the innocent boldness of children, she tugged lightly at it, revealing a delicate silver pendant etched with two initials. "H. What's this?" Lily asked, eyes wide. Clara's hand flew to the pendant, tucking it quickly out of sight. Her smile was gentle but forced. "Just something that belonged to my mother," she said, her voice softer than usual. Emma, older by 2 minutes but far sharper, tilted her head. "Like Harrington Holdings?" she whispered, recalling the gleaming logo she had seen on billboards along the highway. Clara's face paled for the briefest second before she knelt and pressed a finger to her lips. "It's just a coincidence." She kissed Emma's forehead and changed the subject, leading them out the door. But the image of Clara's trembling hand lingered in Emma's mind. The strangeness deepened a week later when James took the girls and Clara grocery shopping. As they moved down the aisles, James noticed Clara stiffen near the bakery section. A middle-aged woman in pearls and a tailored coat paused mid-step, staring at Clara with recognition that was both sharp and unsettling. "Miss Harrington?" the woman blurted, loud enough to turn heads. Clara froze, her knuckles whitening on the handle of the cart. Then, without explanation, she muttered, "Excuse me," and walked briskly toward the exit, leaving James momentarily stunned. He caught up with her outside. "What was that about?" he asked, half bewildered, half concerned. Clara forced a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Mistaken identity. I get that sometimes." Her explanation was thin, and James knew it. Still, the pleading look in her eyes made him hold his tongue. That night, as he put the girls to bed, Emma asked, "Daddy, do you think Clara has secrets?" James hesitated, brushing back her hair. "Everyone does, sweetheart. The question is whether the secret matters." His words were meant to reassure, but they lingered with him long after the twins fell asleep. Later, he passed Clara's room on the way to his own and noticed the faint glow of her lamp through the door. She was hunched over her leather notebook, writing with intensity, her brow furrowed. James lingered, almost knocked, but chose not to. He couldn't deny Clara's impact on his daughters. Their laughter was louder, their tears quieter. Yet the questions pressed against him like weights. Why did she wear a pendant linked to one of the wealthiest families in the state? Why did strangers call her by a name she refused to acknowledge? He told himself it was paranoia, that maybe he was looking for flaws where there were none. But deep inside, James felt the tremor of something inevitable, a truth waiting at the edge of their fragile peace. The chill of late October carried a hint of winter, and with it came the moment that unraveled everything James thought he knew. The twins were outside riding their bikes in the quiet street while Clara supervised from the porch. James had just returned from a long day at school, loosening his tie as he walked up the path, when the sharp cry of metal scraping pavement split the calm. Emma's bike tipped on the curb, throwing her to the ground with a thud. Lily screamed, rushing to her sister's side. James sprinted forward, but Clara was faster. She scooped Emma into her arms with startling strength and calm, issuing instructions with authority. "Lily, grab my bag." "James, start the truck. We're going to the hospital." The urgency in her voice left no room for argument. Within minutes, they were speeding towards St. Mary's Medical Center, Emma whimpering softly in the back seat. James's hands clenched the wheel, his chest tight with fear. Beside him, Clara held Emma's hand, murmuring reassurances that soothed the child far more than anything James could manage. It wasn't until they pulled into the emergency bay that James noticed the stares. People were looking not at Emma, but at Clara. A nurse's eyes widened, and a young man near the entrance whispered urgently into his phone. Cameras flashed, sudden and intrusive. James barely registered it until a voice called out above the chaos, "Clara Harrington, over here." The name cut through the air like glass. Clara froze, her face pale as reporters surged forward. Shutters clicked, microphones shoved into her space, questions fired rapid and unmerciless. "Why are you here? Why are you working as a babysitter? Is this some kind of publicity stunt?" James stood stunned, the words echoing in his head. Harrington. As in Harrington Holdings, the empire that owned half the city. He turned to Clara, searching her face for denial, but her eyes were wide with something between fear and resignation. She whispered to him, "I'm sorry," before the nurses whisked Emma inside. For the first time since Sarah's death, James felt the ground shift beneath him, as if he had invited a stranger into his family's most sacred spaces. The truth was out. Their gentle babysitter was the daughter of one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the state. News vans crowded the hospital parking lot by evening, and by the time Emma was discharged with nothing more serious than a sprained wrist, the story had already spread online. Headlines screamed, "CEO's daughter found living in disguise. Clara Harrington rescues local girl." Back at the house, James paced the kitchen, his mind a storm. He wanted to demand answers, But the image of Clara holding Emma, her eyes wet with worry, softened his anger. She wasn't faking that care. He had seen it too clearly. It was the twins who discovered the rest. While James was outside taking a reporter's call he never wanted to answer, Emma and Lily crept into Clara's room. Their curiosity had grown ever since the necklace incident, and now, with the world outside buzzing about her name, they couldn't resist. Beneath a sweater in her bag, they found the small leather notebook she always guarded. Emma opened it, expecting lists or schedules. Instead, she found letters page after page written to someone named Mom. The handwriting was elegant, steady, and the words spilled raw grief and longing. Clara wrote about growing up in marble halls that felt like prisons, about a father who measured her life in profit margins, and about a mother who had died too soon. In the margins, Emma saw drawings of two little girls who looked eerily like herself and Lily, stick-figured with messy hair and smiling faces. Lily gasped. "She wrote about us." Just then Clara entered, her eyes filling with panic as she saw the notebook in their hands. "Please," she whispered, sinking to her knees. "Don't tell your dad." Emma, still clutching the journal, looked at her not with fear but with something gentler. "You miss your mom like we miss ours." Clara nodded, tears streaming. "Yes, that's why I came here. I wanted to feel what it was like, to belong somewhere real." Later that night, James found the three of them curled together on the couch, Clara's journal forgotten on the table. He picked it up, read a few lines, and felt his anger falter. She wasn't playing a game. She was running from a life that had suffocated her, searching for the warmth his daughters had so freely given. Still, as he closed the notebook, James's heart ached with betrayal. She had hidden her name, her fortune, her entire life. And now, with the press circling like wolves, their fragile peace was shattered. The days after Clara's identity was exposed felt like living inside a storm. Reporters camped outside the Miller home, their cameras waiting for any glimpse of the so-called runaway heiress. James hung blankets over the windows, but the flash of bulbs still pierced the night. Emma and Lily clung to him, their laughter replaced with anxious whispers. The peace that Clara had brought into their home had evaporated, replaced with chaos he couldn't control. On the third evening, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. From it emerged a tall man in a tailored suit, Victor Harrington, CEO of Harrington Holdings, Clara's father. His presence filled the small front yard with a gravity that made James's stomach twist. He looked at James as if the house itself offended him. "Where is my daughter?" he demanded. Clara stepped forward from the porch, her notebook clutched to her chest. "I'm here, Father." For a moment, Victor's stern facade cracked with relief, but it was quickly buried under steel. "You've embarrassed this family enough. Pack your things." "We're leaving." James stood frozen, torn between anger and helplessness. This was Clara's world, one he had no claim to. Yet when he saw the tears brimming in her eyes, he found his voice. "She's not a child you can order around. She's been here, taking care of my daughters when no one else would." Victor's gaze sharpened. "And what are you? A schoolteacher with debts and 2 children clinging to you. Don't fool yourself, she doesn't belong in this life." James felt the words like a punch. He wanted to shout, to demand respect, but doubt gnawed at him. Was Victor right? Was Clara's place really beside marble staircases and boardrooms, not in his crumbling house with squeaky floors? That night, Clara confessed everything. She told James about her mother, a gentle woman who had been silenced in a world of ruthless ambition. She told him how her father's empire crushed small businesses without a second thought, how she grew up surrounded by wealth but starving for affection. Her voice cracked when she admitted she envied Emma and Lily not for their toys or clothes, but for the way James knelt to listen when they spoke, the way he carried their fears as if they were his own. "I wanted to feel what it was like to be in a family that loved without conditions," Clara whispered. James's chest ached. He wanted to believe her, but anger still smoldered. "So you came here pretending, playing house with us?" Clara shook her head fiercely. "No, I didn't expect to stay, but then I saw them. And you, and it stopped feeling like pretending." He turned away, torn between the warmth she had brought and the lies she had told. It was Emma and Lily who broke the silence. They stood in the doorway, small and determined, their voices trembling but sure. "She's family," Emma said. "She helped when we were scared. She makes pancakes the way Mom used to." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Don't make her go, Daddy." James felt something inside him crumble. His daughters saw in Clara what he was too afraid to admit. She wasn't just a stranger who had hidden her name, she had chosen them. The final blow came the next morning when Clara revealed another truth she had been carrying like a stone. Sitting at the kitchen table, her hands trembling, she said, "James, there's something you don't know. Years ago, Harrington Holdings canceled a contract with the mill that supplied your woodworking shop. It pushed them into bankruptcy. That's why you lost your workshop." James's breath caught, the memory of that loss slamming into him. The day he closed his shop, the day his dreams folded. Rage surged, but so did understanding. Clara's shame was written in every line of her face. "I thought if I lived as far from that world as possible, maybe I could make amends in my own way. But I should have told you." James's fists clenched, the betrayal cutting deep. He wanted to send her away, to protect himself and his daughters from more pain. And yet, he remembered her hands steadying Emma in the hospital, her laughter braided into the girl's days, the letters to her mother aching with honesty. He looked at Clara, broken and brave, and realized the choice before him wasn't only about her, it was about what kind of man he wanted to be. Winter arrived with its quiet hush, softening the chaos that had once consumed the Miller household. After Clara's confession, days passed in a fragile silence, but change came not in loud declarations, but in steady, deliberate steps. Clara returned to her father's world, not as the obedient heiress he demanded, but as a woman determined to confront the empire that had cast shadows over families like James's. She stood before Victor Harrington, in his towering glass office, her voice clear, though her hands trembled. "If you want me to stay, if you want me to carry this family's name, it has to mean more than profit. We destroyed people's lives, Father. We destroyed his." She slid James's story across the desk, the foreclosure papers, the unpaid invoices, evidence she had quietly gathered. Victor's jaw tightened, his pride bristling, but Clara didn't waver. "Either you change, or I walk away. And this time, I won't be silent." For the first time, Victor saw his daughter not as a pawn, but as a mirror of his late wife's compassion. Reluctantly, painfully, he agreed to fund a community initiative, an apology written not in words but in actions. Clara insisted it be called the Renewal Fund, aimed at supporting small workshops and family businesses that had been crushed under corporate weight. News of her stand spread quickly, transforming the headlines that once mocked her into stories of redemption. Meanwhile, James wrestled with his own heart. He had built his life on resilience, on the belief that love meant sacrifice. Clara's presence had stirred old wounds, but it had also opened doors to healing he didn't know he needed. One snowy evening, after putting the twins to bed, he found Clara waiting by the porch, her breath misting in the cold. She held out the leather notebook, worn at the edges, pages filled with her deepest confessions. "I want you to have this," she said, "because the next pages, I don't want to write them alone." James took it, the weight of her trust heavier than any secret she had kept. His voice was low, steady. "You hurt me, Clara, but you also gave Emma and Lily something I couldn't give them on my own. Maybe what matters is what we choose now." She nodded, tears catching the faint glow of the porch light. "Then let's choose together." In the months that followed, the Renewal Fund became more than a corporate initiative. With Clara's influence and James's hands-on guidance, they transformed an abandoned warehouse into a community center where children could learn woodworking, music, and art. Emma and Lily painted murals on the walls, their laughter echoing through halls that had once been silent. Clara stood beside James at the ribbon cutting, not as an heiress, not as a babysitter, but as part of a family that chose to build rather than destroy. The town whispered of scandal turned miracle, of a single dad and an heiress who had found common ground in love and loss. For James, it was simpler. His daughters smiled more freely, slept more soundly. Clara's presence no longer felt like an intrusion, but like sunlight after a storm. The memory of Sarah remained, tender and unforgotten, but James realized love didn't replace it, expanded. On a spring morning, as the fields turned green again, the four of them packed a picnic and drove out to the hills. Emma chased Lily through tall grass, their laughter rising like music. Clara spread a blanket, her braid unraveling in the wind, and leaned against James. She pulled the leather notebook from her bag and set it between them. "This started as a diary for my mother," she whispered. "But now it's our family story." James wrapped an arm around her, watching his daughters run, free and fearless. For the first time in years, his chest felt light. He pressed a kiss to Clara's temple and said, "Then let's make the next chapters worth remembering." The sun dipped low, casting gold across the meadow. Emma and Lily came running back, breathless and bright-eyed, clutching wildflowers. They placed them in Clara's lap, declaring, "For our family." And in that moment, under the open sky, the fractures of the past gave way to something whole, a family not bound by blood or fortune, but by choice, love, and the courage to begin again. In the end, this wasn't just the story of a secret revealed or a fortune hidden. It was the story of a single dad who fought to protect his daughters, and a young woman who discovered that true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in love freely given. James, Emma, Lily, and Clara built something stronger than legacy or business, a family chosen through courage, forgiveness, and second chances. And maybe that's the reminder we all need, that healing begins when we dare to trust again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Tales for more stories of resilience, love, and hope. And tell us in the comments, what does family mean to you?